Hello. Happy marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you all are well. Listen, I'm super excited. Today we are talking about, unfortunately, um, the eviction process. I'm going to be providing some tips for landlords, some tips for tenants as well. But today is all about evictions, what landlords and tenants must know, not should know, but must know. Here it is. 2025 is going to bring about a lot of changes for a lot of people. So my goal today is to share information to make sure that it's relevant, to make sure that it's clear and understandable for those of you who are tenants, for those of you who are landlords, or maybe your property managers. If this is your first time tuning in, hey y'all, hey, I'm Karissa Spann, the landlord and tenant expert. This is what I do each and every Monday. I do apologize. I came on a little later today. I'm usually live 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Monday right here on my platform. And I am going to ascertain questions that some of you may have. I know that some questions did come in by way of text message. So I'm going to be answering those questions live today. I'm live on multiple platforms. So if you see me looking away, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm keeping up. I'm looking at questions or comments that may be coming in from my various platforms. I do also want to share that any information that I provide today, that you know and understand that it is not legal advice. It is, however, the industry's best tips and practices. So I just wanted to let you all know that often I get questions about whether or not I'm an attorney. I am not an attorney. I'm a landlord and tenant expert. And I know that for many of you, this year is going to be a very challenging year for a lot of people. So again, my goal is to provide information, to give you all this education, if you will, so that many of you can make better and informed decisions, or perhaps you know someone who is a landlord or a tenant and can use this information. So if you wouldn't mind, I always like to know where my viewers are tuned in from. Please let me know which platform you're watching from. Please let me know your geographical location. All right. At the end, I'm going to share an announcement. I've already posted it in the description below. Please take a look at it, but I'm going to share an announcement a little bit later. I want to get straight into this segment on today because this is some much needed information. And many of you know this is what I enjoy doing. I enjoy providing information. If I'm moving a little too fast, please slow me down. Drop your comment, drop your question in the chat box. I will respond. Okay. And again, this segment today is all about evictions, what tenants and landlords must know. All right. So I know that last week I shared information, a lot of information primarily for landlords. Today is for landlords as well as tenants. So if you are a tenant, I have tips and information for you on today, as well as landlords. Is that all right? All right. So let me get straight into it because I do have a lot to share. Here it is. When it comes to evictions, they can definitely be costly. They are expensive. They can be extremely expensive. Evictions are stressful as well as time consuming, but sometimes they are unavoidable. Some are, many are not. Okay. And so, whether you're a landlord, whether you're new, you're experienced, or you're just navigating the legal process on your own, or perhaps you have an attorney, this is what I want you to know about the eviction process. If you are a tenant facing an eviction or some sort of difficult situation, I want you to know that it is always important to understand what your rights as well as your responsibilities are. That is so critical as well as essential. So, this segment today is all about that. I'm talking about the legal eviction process, what landlords must do, and what tenants should expect. I'm also talking about some of the mistakes that many landlords or housing providers can avoid making to alleviate some time as well as money. And then also, I'm going to share alternatives to evictions because sometimes working together, landlords and tenants, you can avoid going through that process, but you have to know legally what you can and cannot do, and then also how to handle those difficult situations or those difficult tenants when you are facing that eviction process. All right, so in a nutshell, that's what I'm covering today. I'm going to get straight into my segment for landlords first. All right, this segment today, again, it is so critically important because it impacts landlords as well as tenants. And so you should always know and be aware of the process so that you can avoid some of those costly mistakes. Now, I will say this, if you are a landlord and maybe this is your first time dealing with an eviction, right? I would always recommend speaking to a landlord and tenant attorney who can best represent you as well as that property. Now, just depending on the jurisdiction and also just depending on if your tenant is participating in any type of housing program, you want to make sure first and foremost that whoever you hire to represent you understand the rules of any housing programs, because it would be a sad day if you have someone representing you. They are not aware of the program, they're not aware of the requirements, they're not aware of the regulations and the laws, and they try to represent you and then it doesn't go in your favor. So that's one of the first things I always recommend, to make sure that your attorney is knowledgeable about the housing programs that your tenants may be participating in. All right. Unfortunately, it's not a cookie cutter type of situation. And I just want to pause and expound on that a little bit, because let's say if you have a tenant who is participating in some sort of housing program and perhaps the funding is cut because of the government shutdown or because there are no longer workers to implement the program, that maybe the program has not paid on your tenant's behalf. You have to know what the laws are. Please follow the laws, okay? Because things may change. As we can see, things have changed drastically since the new leadership of the United States. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to come, which is why I'm encouraging you all, stay connected, keep showing up every Monday, because I'm following updates. I'm following the changes and how it impacts a lot of these rental communities all throughout the United States, whether it's a market tenant or a tenant who's participating in some sort of housing program. I'm always keeping my eye out, keeping my ear gate open for the new changes that are coming down the pipe. All right, so here it is with the legal eviction process. The first thing that, as a housing provider, you should always know is this: even if there is a lease violation or perhaps your tenant has not paid you rent, you have to issue the proper notice. All right. The laws are going to be very similar, but not necessarily the same, just depending on the jurisdiction. So you should always know what the laws are wherever your rental property is. You have to properly notify that tenant. Okay. You want to make sure that if there are any specific forms that you are required to use, that you are using those forms, because you don't want to try to evict your tenant And then when you get to court, the judge kick it out because you have not properly notified that tenant. Okay. So again, it could be a lease violation. It could be unpaid rent. You want to make sure that if, for instance, you have to file a notice to quit, you want to follow up with filing that eviction, making sure that you're filing the proper forms with the court, because that court process and the landlord requirements, it's so critical for you to know and understand, and then to make sure that you're following it. So when you go to court, the judge, if you're granted with a judgment or writ, that it's something that the court will decide. You cannot, unfortunately, just go into a rental property and put the tenant out because they're not paying the rent or there's some sort of lease violations. The court has a procedure that must be followed. And so you have to understand what happens if the tenant disputes the eviction. You want to make sure that you have that proper documentation. You want to make sure that if you are legally required to have some sort of business license to run your rental property business, or a renter's license, just depending on the location, the names may differ, but very similar. Because sometimes if you don't have those things in place, and if your property, your rental property is not legally registered with the city or the state, just depending on whatever program you're participating with, if you do not have all those things in place, I've seen a lot of judges dismiss or delay that court case. And that's something that you don't want to do. So please understand why it is so critically important for you to have those things in place. Now, when it comes to the writ of possession, that's the final step to regaining or claiming that property back and to get access to that unit legally. All right. So my one warning that I do have for landlords today is for you to know and understand that landlords who skip these steps and ignore the tenant protection laws that are in place, they could have their cases dismissed almost immediately. So you don't want to do that. All right. But now let me just share some of the common mistakes that I see landlords making. They don't give proper notice, right? So remember I said you can't just go in and put a tenant out, but you just can't tell a tenant to leave. I know that sometimes people may have conversations, but you have to make sure that you understand that without proper notice and you just tell a tenant to leave verbally, that's not a legal eviction. That is definitely a prohibited practice. You also want to know and understand if it's a situation where you want your tenant to leave because they have not paid rent. Sometimes when you accept a partial payment, this can reset that eviction process. Let me repeat that. If you have a tenant who has been delinquent on the rent, in many jurisdictions, if you accept a partial rent payment, this can reset that eviction process. So you want to know what you can and cannot do. I talked about not just walking in and putting tenants out, right? If you do that, if you change the locks, or let's say if you're supposed to be paying the utility bills, the water, the electric, the gas, or the oil, right? And let's just say you just stop doing it, okay? Because you want the tenant to leave. That is considered a self-help eviction. Locking a tenant out, shutting off the utilities are definitely, those are two things top of the list that are illegal. Please don't do those self-help evictions. All right? Because let me just also add this. When those things happen, not only could that judge dismiss the case, but in many situations, the tenants can end up suing you. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you may have a strong case, but because you did not listen to the advice that I'm giving today, the tenant has now created a situation where they're going to sue you. Another big mistake that I see landlords making is not having documentation. And so without proof, landlords can lose, and many do lose their case in court. All right. So please make sure, again, before you file that eviction, you want to review your lease. You want to review those local laws because it can save you thousands of dollars. All right. Now, here's some tips that you can do. as a landlord, one of the things that I've always recommended to some of my clients, first and foremost, is this. Usually you can save thousands of dollars on legal fees and court costs and attorney fees if you have a tenant who is willing to participate and accept a cash for keys deal. That means that you are paying a tenant to leave voluntarily, but you should always make sure that it's in writing and you get that tenant to sign. Whatever the financial amount is, you want to make sure that it's clear. You want to give a timeline and any information that the tenant must know. How are they going to return the keys? Are you doing a move out inspection together? Those are just some of the things that I would always recommend. And with that, know and understand that with a cash for keys deal, hello, Alicia, thank you so much for tuning in. With a cash for keys deal, when that tenant sign and accept, then that is saying, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, you're going to leave the property. You're going to leave on such and such date. In exchange, I'm giving you whatever the amount of the money is. And it just varies. So there's no minimum and there's no maximum amount. Okay. You can also consider mediation. Have someone to listen to your situation. There are professional mediators who can step in and assist. You can also offer payment plans, working with tenants instead of losing months of rent. Sometimes I've had tenants who, in lieu of taking them to court, they agreed to pay their rent plus perhaps maybe an additional 10% each month, right? And so sometimes you can allow the tenants to stay without going through the court process, and this allows the tenant to catch up. Now, if they're currently behind, let me just add this here. Let me park right here, put a quarter in the meter, because if you have a tenant who has had maybe a break in employment, maybe they have a loss of income, they may not be able to afford paying all of that rent money in one lump sum. Sometimes they will pay their rent plus 10%. You always want to look at what they can afford to pay. All right. And then also you can do the lease buyout. I've seen many people do that where they negotiate with the tenant for the tenant to move out early. This sometimes can work in your favor instead of going to court. All right. So evictions should be the last resort. Let me just say that, because sometimes there's a smarter way out. All right. So now let me give some tips for tenants. So remember, I said, if you're a tenant, I have some tips for you as well. So when it comes to landlords, for renters, for tenants, when it comes to landlords who are looking to take you to court, you want to try to work with them. Okay. When you do that, it puts you in a better situation, in a better position. So if you're having some sort of challenge, if you're not able to pay the rent, even if there is a lease violation, communicate early with your landlord or your property manager. Let them know what challenges you're having. See if there's some way that you can work it out versus going to court. Because if you go to court and you get evicted, it's going to be a lot harder to rent another place. And you don't want that on your record. That's public information. It could prevent you from renting. It could prevent you also from purchasing a home if that is your goal. So always, at all costs, try to avoid evictions. You always want to know and understand what your rights are. This is one of the things that I talk about so frequently, for tenants to know their rights, because you do, as a tenant, you do have rights, but sometimes you don't know it because you haven't taken the time to do just a little bit of research. So understand wherever you live, what your rights are in that specific jurisdiction. Now, if you should happen to go to court, I know that in many cases, it can be scary. It can be extremely frightening when you are faced with an eviction and you have to go to court. I always recommend to show up at court. Don't make the decision to not go to court. Go to court, plead your case. See if there's some sort of legal help or maybe some sort of tenant advocate who can assist you before. But if not, always, always, always show up at that court. Show up at the court, go into the courtroom, talk to the judge, Let them know what your situation is, because you don't know how things are going to turn out for you. I've seen a lot of tenants who could have had their case extended or delayed, um, just work against them because they didn't show up. So please make sure that you show up. All right. Some additional tips for landlords. Let me come back to you. You always want to make sure that you document everything. And as I indicated a little bit earlier, you want to follow that legal process. And then again, you want to consider any alternatives before filing, working with that tenant. So I'm going to pause because I have a couple of questions that have come in. And let me acknowledge some people who are here today. Thank you so much. Hey, girl. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. All right. So I do have a question that came in regarding, this is from a landlord who wants expert advice on handling the eviction the right way. All right. One of the things that I will always recommend, very simple, the tips, the strategies that I provided today. I've covered extensively, very quickly, some things that you can do. And if you are not knowledgeable about the process, I would never recommend taking matters into your own hands, because you could make your situation worse. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. And so if you're not knowledgeable about the laws, please make sure that you speak to an attorney. Even if it's someone who's not going to represent you at court, please make sure that you reach out to an attorney to see what your options are. So thank you so much for that question. A tenant has a question. They need help in understanding their rights. So it just depends on where you live. A lot of cities, a lot of counties, they have laws for that specific area. So I would just encourage you to reach out. You can always contact the court to see if the court has knowledge of a program or an office who can assist you as a tenant. All right. So I did cover a lot today. And again, 2025 is going to be a very challenging year, unfortunately, for a lot of people. And I know that I shared a lot today. But listen, this is what I do each and every Monday. I'm live. I'm providing information. All it costs is your time to just show up. So I do hope that this information was helpful today. If you have questions, if you have comments or concerns when I am not live, you can always email me. Let me provide you with my email address. You can leave a comment on one of my platforms. Let me share my email address. It is going to be info@landlordlife.com. That is my email address at the bottom of the screen there. I provide information each and every week for landlords as well as tenants. And I know that many of you have a lot of questions that I may not be able to answer. Some of you have asked about signing up or taking a property management course. So I do want to announce that I am now implementing a free 8-week property management course. It is online. This is an intro to property management. It is going to get started. My first week is March the 3rd. I'm going to run it through April. So if you are interested, the link is in the description. Please sign up today. It's absolutely free. All right. It is open for the first 100 people. Okay. For the spring semester. I've been in the property management space for almost 2.5 decades. I am a licensed property manager. I am a property management educator. I enjoy providing value. And if you are thinking about, if you know someone who is considering a career change, let me just tell you this, and this is a promise, this is a guarantee, that in property management, there are always a need for property managers. There's always a need for landlords, because people always need a place to stay. So if you are thinking about a career change, if you want more information, I provided my email address. You can use the link in the description. Sign up today. Again, class will get started very soon. It will run for 8 consecutive weeks. And I'm super excited because this is something that I've been working on for a while now. All right. So that's what I wanted to share today. So let me just do a quick recap because I shared a lot of information for landlords as well as for tenants today. So one of my tips for the landlords is very clear. Make sure that you document everything. Make sure that you are not implementing a self-help eviction. Please make sure that you are reaching out to an attorney regarding your legal matter before taking the situation into your own hands. I shared tips for tenants on today. Very clear, know as a tenant what your rights are. Okay. I also encourage you to communicate early with your landlord. And then I also encourage tenants, if you do have to go to court, if you get a notice for court, please make sure that you show up, because sometimes showing up is half of the battle. And you can plead your case with the judge, and sometimes things may work out, but you don't know until you show up. All right. So I just wanted to come on really quickly and share that information with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, AJ Mack. Hi, you answered my question. It was great, but never emailed me. I thank you so much for that. I do apologize. I switched my platform. Let me just ask if you would not mind, can you email me again? I had some emails that came in, but I unfortunately was not able to retrieve it. So can you please email me again, and I will definitely follow up. All right. So thank you so much for that. All right. Well, listen, it's been a fantastic pleasure having you to join me today. And again, if you are interested in taking my free 8-week online property manager class, I invite you to join me. Listen, I'm going to provide a wealth of information. For those of you who do complete this 8-week course with me, let me just tell you, it will be fun. It will be intense. You will learn a lot. You will receive a certificate of completion, absolutely free. It costs you nothing but your time to show up. So if you have found it helpful joining me for these short lives on Monday, sign up for my property management class. Share it with somebody else who's looking to get a jump start in property management, or maybe they want to grow or expand in the industry. I promise that it can definitely be a rewarding experience. Like I said, I've been in this space for over 20 plus years, and things are always changing. I absolutely love providing and adding value to you all. So again, thank you for showing up. My time is up. I absolutely thank you for yours. Let me share my email address one last time for those of you who are just tuning in, or you tuned in late, you just joined me late. So that's my email address there. Okay. It's going to be info@landlordlife.com. All right. So my time is up. Again, I absolutely thank you for yours. I'll see you all next week. And for those of you who have already signed up for the class, thank you. I'll see you on the inside. I'm going to say bye for now.